Welcome, everybody. We're here today with Bill Mitchell to talk about a crazy interesting topic, undercover investigations. It's a subject I don't know much about, so I'm pretty interested to hear what Bill has to say. I think of undercover ops as a tool of law enforcement or a spy agency, so I'm kind of curious about how and why a private investigator might go undercover. What kinds of cases might require undercover work, how to do it legally, safely, and how to charge for it. So we're going to bring in our resident expert, Bill Mitchell. Bill works with us here at PI Education on a fairly regular basis throughout the year, and we're happy to have him back. Bill, welcome.
Good to be with you again, Hal.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and, kind of who you are, what you do, where you're from, and why you were qualified to talk about this topic of undercover investigations.
Well, a little bit about me is I actually got my start in a family investigative business. My dad was out of the FBI as a special agent and started a metro agency out of the Philadelphia area. So naturally, I had the entrance, took advantage of it. And, I've been licensed in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, a couple other states. But the idea is that I've had decades worth of investigative work and training. And so what I thought was interesting about this subject was how often we did undercover jobs for clients. In the Metro Philly area, we had a lot of big business, department stores, pharmacies, manufacturers, and surveillance just wasn't the way to go. You just couldn't watch the outside of a building long enough to see the inner workings. So what we would do is get somebody inside, or maybe several people.
Okay, well, just kind of real quickly, walk us through kind of an overview of what exactly is an undercover operation.
The broader concept of this is that that you're internalizing someone with the eyes and ears that can tell you what you're hoping to find out and place them at the right job or the right time of year. Maybe it's a seasonal hire. It could be shift work, any number of the shifts, one for each shift. And the concept is that a client says to you, we have a major theft problem, we have a drug problem, we have production issues, quality issues, we have issues with management, just things that you really aren't going to figure out until you put somebody inside to become an employee. And that's really what you're doing is you're ingratiating yourself, your operation inside. And so then what happens is, as we would hire, we would fit that job opening to a place where they could have mobility or creativity or just be at the right place where they suspect, maybe there's something going out the back door. So we put somebody on a loading dock. So that's like the general concept of how we started doing undercover assignments.
Tell me a little bit about kind of like if you're getting ready to do an undercover assignment, and I got to be honest with you, Bill, this sounds really like fun work. But how do you kind of assess the situation and develop a scope of work for an assignment like this?
Oh, that's a really good question. So what happens is this is one of those options that we found work really well when we met with a client. And I guess the way we gotten started was that because a number of our cases were Fortune 500 companies. And then over time, we said, with a major problem like this, there's also companies that have issues that aren't major companies. They're something that, let's say it's a restaurant and they want to know, how things are going, and, it may not be criminal. So you offer this service of getting somebody that would match a location either by their talent or their likability, their ability to communicate. I'll give you one example. We hired an English teacher, and to our delight was their reports are wonderful because they like to write, and they could do this during the summer when they were on furlough from the school system. So we had 3 or 4 months we could have somebody inside a company and developing themselves and becoming part of the workforce. So we translated that to, hey, this is a great way to get around, just trying to interview everybody and find out what's going on, where we actually put somebody inside. And then what we did was we actually made them employees. They were not our employees. We were just paying them like a vendor for information. So the requirement was that you, every day you worked and you did a report, was the way you got paid. And then we would have guidelines and communication issues with all our agents that were hired, on a daily basis. And we had a method to making sure that we didn't lose the trail of information, and or we would develop more information as we learned it. And that's a great way to get results or information that a client's looking for.
Right. So the people, the operatives that you're putting in these situations, and I've got some kind of personal curiosities about this, but number one, are those people licensed investigators?
No, they
Okay.
never are.
Okay.
No, and as a matter of fact, you hit on one point, which we actually use this as a method to find out if we had a good person that we could actually bring on. If they were very observant, they were good at reporting, they were dependable, they were likable, we could bring them and use them for surveillance work, say on insurance cases. And it was a great tool to say, hey, this person's going to work out great.
It's a way to
So,
identify talent.
absolutely. And you'll know right away if they can't write a report or they don't do a report. If the client is saying this person's nothing but a troublemaker, then we found out that was a cleaning process as well. You don't want that to happen, but if it does, then you quickly get on it and you change gears and say, okay, we got somebody new.
Okay. So then the second question is, do you ever feel like the folks that are doing this kind of work are in any kind of danger?
And so the idea of risk exists no matter what, especially in these kind of cases. I mean, think about all of us in this business face risk all the time. Something as crazy as just a red light and choosing whether to go through it or not. If you put somebody in a place where they're dealing heavy drugs and there's quite an operation going on, then the risk is much higher. And so then the responsibility is to really roll back how much involvement they're involved at that level. If it's that dramatic, then you really want to monitor your assignments every day, and you may pull somebody out quickly. So getting to that, which is a really important thing, is the cover story. Is how do you get somebody in, and then that operative has to maintain that cover story all the way through and afterwards. So that's critical to minimize risks to them, but also compromising, the ongoing operation, because there is a lot of risk.
Okay. Interesting. Um, let's talk about, so we've got some folks in the room today. We've got about 33 people in right now watching, which is pretty exciting, because this is not a regularly scheduled webinar. This is a one-off webinar. And I think we're going to use this in a couple of ways going forward. But we've got a question from the field from Nick Padlock. I think Nick is out of Chicago. Is that right? Anyway, he says, do you ever work with any Native American tribes?
That I can say no, we haven't. Now I know of people that get involved, and again, this is a concept. I personally haven't, but if you are looking to make this work, then it really doesn't matter who the client is. It just depends on what you're trying to identify. And so the methodology is what's critical. Following this plan, following the concepts that are laid out in this course will help you to say, hey, I can do this, or I better not even try it.
Okay. That's an interesting thing. So let's move along. So let's look at this. I'm kind of going down. Bill is one of the sharpest instructors we've dealt with here at PI Education, and he's always on top of it. So he was kind enough to put together an outline for me to kind of go by. So let's look here and talk about identifying and structuring an undercover operator's service class with respect to licensing and tax considerations, those things. You mentioned they're paid as a vendor. Are you paying that employee, or is the company that is hiring you to manage the undercover investigation paying that employee?
That's a very important question to answer and to stick with. When you meet a client, they are hiring your person or
Okay.
persons. They go through the process, they fill out applications, all the forms, the W-2s, all the information that is a legitimate hire. They work for them on whatever shift they need them. They work the hours, they work under who they want them to work for in a shift position. What you do as the manager of this is you buy information from them and you buy their report. So typical, the concept is a daily report. And that can look like, and I got one right here, typical to like a surveillance report, where you have, you identify what you would in a start time and significant breaks or things that happened along that daily journey. And so that's put together and given to you as the owner of that information, or the buyer of the information, as though you were buying it from a database. And that's really just a concept. It's not that clinical, but that's the concept. Is that what you're doing is, and by asking for a daily report, is you're forcing that person to get information to you, and you'll know if they're not. You'll know if they're really just kind of repeating the same thing day after day, looks like a blueprint. What you're asking them to do is start identifying anybody they work with, and names and places and responsibilities, and if they were late or if there was a fight that broke out and who was involved, just the day-to-day, what's happening inside the plant. And then of course they're mission driven too. You're going to give them objectives saying, where you're in this position. As a matter of fact, you're working maintenance, and you're going to have the ability to go room to room, but here's where you need to be every day or every other day, or an event's coming. You have the freedom, get over there, go who's attending, who's breaking for lunch and not coming back. So the position that you fill is one that you have a discussion in detail with your clients. So your
Okay.
clients will tell you, oh, okay, I got a job. I got it. And you're not going to walk in and say, hey, we're going to put a guy in next week. What you're going to do is have this pre-meeting and say, think about this position. You're going to bring them on. Where do you want them? And is there a day that you can bring them in that would look legitimate? And often this is going to be the head of the company, the owner of the company. So let's also go into something that's so critical, is that who do you report to? And so think about it. In Fortune 500 companies, you're probably going to be reporting to the boss, the lawyer, and the personnel director,
Okay.
because everybody's got to be all hands on deck about what happened here. And so then the other thing is, it's the old adage is, I can keep a secret, but it's the person I told it to that didn't. So you don't want a lot of people to know, obviously. And so that minimizes that issue of risk as you move through here, is who do I report to as the investigator? And so one of the things that we've done, which has worked really well, is we designate a person who's going to receive the report, the handwritten report, not the digital report. You're going to take it in a package once a week and drop it off at their house. Now that might seem crazy, but think about it. If this email gets discovered by somebody, now guess where you are? That reminds me of a guy that told the husband where his wife and the cheater was in the hotel here in South Carolina, and I went up. They both got one of them shot.
Oh,
So we can't have that. You can't have that happen to your operation. And we have never had any issues falling out, because the way you manage this information, if you do it on that level, you're really making it difficult to be discovered. And you want that person to finish his job and get out and never look back.
right. So what I've got two questions, and I'm going to ask the first one that will lead to the second one once we get into it. So what types of undercover operations do you see primarily? What are you looking for?
So in terms of clients, for example, I'll give you ones that we've done pharmaceutical company. We had somebody in that was on shift work and they were losing drugs. They had inventory problem. We had someone working at a manufacturing plant that processed chicken. And so we, you know, you want the job? Sure. It pays pretty good. You get a regular check, but you also get paid for reports. It was a pretty good incentive. So, you know, at the end of the week, they're looking at a pretty good take home. So, seasonal 5 and 10s that hire people at the beach. And there's all kinds of inventory that comes and goes, and chances for employees to become non-invested, brokers of goods. So by theft, right? So your client can be as simple as a bar owner, something like that, where somebody that owns a bar, or that they come to you and say, I've got issues and I really don't know how to do this. And you say, well, I can stake your bar out, but how long is that going to go before they go, oh, how much would you get? No, we saw very little. So, putting somebody inside is another way too of generating a fairly decent revenue stream, because you're not doing this just like a typical job where you're going in for $100 a week and you're going to do all this work and create all these opportunities to put people in. You're going to get good at this, but you're also going to be rewarded for it. You don't come away from these jobs saying, gee whiz, that was so much work for so little. You don't do them if you can't get remuneration for it, or that's not worthwhile. So we always charge a pretty good amount on a weekly basis, and so that's the way this works.
Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. You're charging the client for your services. They're also paying the employee, the undercover operative. And I don't want to get into specifics, but kind of give me some ballparks of what we're looking at for an investigative company if they wanted to start marketing this kind of work. What kind of fees are you looking at?
Well, I guess it's like the adage is, you charge what the highway will bear.
Right.
So in other words, if you assess the company as having money's really not the issue, it's getting results. So that's where you'd say, hey, we're going to do this, but we're going to ask for $5,000 a week to do this. Okay, fine. And so out of that, you get your fees, but you're also paying your vendor. And I'm going to keep it that, because some states vary by how they license your workers. And in some states, if they're your secretary, they're going to be licensed. So you have to pay the fee, you got to license them. And again, this is someone you're not going to bring on. They're not going to stay with you. And if they do, then you bring them under your umbrella as an employee, part of your workforce.
And
okay,
Stephanie Mitchell, our manager here at PI Education, has posted a comment basically, and I think this sums it up. It can be a costly type of investigation to hire someone to do an undercover job, but if you're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, $5,000 a week is not that big a deal.
No, and the other thing that's important is, think about it. You're going to do a lot of this work. You're going to spend a lot of time on it. If you don't focus on it, you're not going to get results. So you'll have to baby this, and it has to be done on a daily basis, is communicating constantly. And think about it. If your worker gets a cold, and you have to tell your client, don't expect them, they're going to get better, but you're not fulfilling. If that continues, now you have to figure out, do I keep them and get somebody new? So you're going to watch these progress. And the other part to it is, you're not going to take this on just to do it for 1 week. It's not worth the effort to say this big project is something I'm just going to commit to and give you, 1 week or 1 month. If you and it may just be 1 month, but what you have to do is lower the expectations that it doesn't happen in a month. And it might take 2 weeks for the employee to become part of the acceptable employee workforce. They're being checked out, all the time. So, you want to make sure that as you agree to do these, that you're looking for a period of time. 2 months would be a great opportunity. Like I said, with this one teacher we hired, it was the whole summer, and spent the whole summer, and they actually loved them as an employee. It was a great worker, but we were getting so much information. And then we'll talk about later on, what do you do with it? How do you resolve this process? That's a
Yeah,
key factor in.
yeah, no doubt. And I'm just sitting there thinking about all the things you could gather intelligence wise doing undercover work. If you've got the right person in there doing the work and documenting things in the appropriate manner, some of the types of investigations we've talked about, workplace investigations dealing with productivity and safety and quality issues, those kind of business. If you got someone in there for 2 months, you can gather a lot of information on those things. The other couple of things we've talked about, and you've touched on these a little bit, drug investigations and theft investigations. Drug investigations could get pretty dicey for the undercover person if they're in a situation where someone's going to pressure them to join them kind of business, which leads me to the second question I had, and this comes from one of the people in the room. What legal restrictions do operators have when investigating, and how do you handle non-disclosure agreements, if at all?
Well, the first part to that is we definitely identify that in this course, and that's something that needs to be discussed. And a thumbnail is that you want your people to understand they have no legal authority. They're not law enforcement. Licensed investigators don't have that ability. If you have drugs in your car, guess what? So there's no place for someone to buy drugs, transport drugs, go to parties where drugs are happening. That's not required. And that would be clear to the client, is that what we see is what we'll report. We will not be buying, we're not handling, we're not transferring to somebody else. If it's found on the ground, then it's reported found on the ground, but it's not touched or managed or held, because obviously the fallout from that is huge. And so what was the second part of that question? I'm sorry.
The second part was, what are the legal restrictions do operatives have? And you covered that a little bit with the drug investigations, but even with theft investigations, you've got to think ahead of time, what you can and cannot do. But then the second part of the question was, how do you handle non-disclosure agreements? Do you have your operative sign an NDA, or do you have, the owner of the company sign an NDA? How does that work?
Definitely. And that's where your responsibility is to make sure that you manage confidentiality verbally and daily, but you also want it in writing. You want to have some agreement that is signed on both ends, that you are putting someone in with the understanding that this is not to be disclosed ever. And so that legal restriction protects you as the operator of this, the mission, that the operator driving this. So you really want to handle that all the time. And you made a really good point, because I'll tell you a real life. This is how I got started. At 19, I was hired into a retailer's warehouse to figure some things out. And the person that hired our agency constantly kept coming to me on the work floor saying, "What'd you find? What'd you get? Did you see anything?" And so we bailed on that one. And within a week, I was gone. So it's frightening to think that you have someone, really the whole reason that person did it was that they want to keep paying. They want to hurry and get some quick information in 1 or 2 weeks and push this thing along. So that's why I said, setting this up, you have a level of dialogue with your client saying, we'll manage it. If there are any issues, you go to us. And our person will never go to you. Our person will never meet with you. They'll have no arrangement to meet with you. They don't even know who you are. We want that, because then they're not going to act strange in a room or get pulled aside by something that seems really out of the ordinary, a handshake or a whispering event, and now your person is in a lot of risk. So yes, definitely, it's a big deal to think that broad concept of this person's in, out, does their job. And it's funny, there are times too when our people were actually hired on, and they just stopped reporting, but they were hired on because they were good employees. So
Yeah.
the benefit was we helped in another way.
So I'm just and again, this is my question, but if you got an operative in doing the work, and say that it's an undercover drug investigation, you're trying to find out if, your dock workers are, hitting the crystallized methamphetamine during their break time or something like that. If you take that to law enforcement, who testifies? Do you testify as the manager of the investigation, or do you bring the individuals who did the undercover work in to testify?
That probably would be the last thing you ever want to do is report it as a direct line to your person, because again, they have no protection once they're done with this job. This becomes a nightmare situation where if in fact there is something going on, that there has to be a separation of where that information is, who gets it, how it becomes transferred, and it would probably have to come from someone else in the company who would be brought in, and then that they would actually inform that they themselves would go to law enforcement and say, we have an issue. We suspect, as a matter of fact, we suspect this person. You could check their car on the way out the parking lot. So in other words, you could still manage that, and it would depend on if there's really a serious repetitive problem, you could ask law enforcement to come in and actually do an arrest on the property. But you don't ever want to be part of this criminal enterprise or activity, because I would not want to do, and I would never want to put anybody in that position, and we never did. So your best understanding is that when you set these up, you have a fairly serious conversation with your clients about these issues. We'll never do that. We will not be called upon. We're not going to testify to reports. That's not necessary. You don't need to go at it that way. There are other ways to skin a cat.
I'm kind of curious, and this is just me thinking, through the process. If a company takes your information and goes to the police and says, "Hey, we've got a problem on our dock, and some of the guys are doing drugs. We know they're doing drugs." If the district attorney gets wind that they've done some kind of an undercover investigation, I'm assuming you've never been subpoenaed to testify in something like this.
No.
Okay.
No, and often the mistakes that the users are making is it provides, there's almost always another avenue to get to that closure without mentioning that you have somebody inside watching.
Okay.
And often too, think about it. We've got a teacher working undercover. You want that person as your key witness on a stand on a drug case. Drug cases shouldn't be prosecuted that way. You need to be able to get the drugs. The law enforcement needs to get them themselves. They need to get their own direct evidence. They don't want to rely on a person who is scared to death to even, walk in a courtroom. So right. You want to risk that? No, you probably don't want to go that direction. We just want to be eyes and ears. How many security guards are dragged into eyes and ears situations? They're just, if they're already, that's their job. Most of the time, they never testify to anything that goes on. They just turn the other, they look the other way because they don't want to be involved.
Okay. Good. So talk to us about, I think we've kind of covered, talking about the different types of operations that you could do undercover, workplace investigations, productivity, safety, quality issues. Let's talk a little bit about the ins and outs of what someone as an operative would be looking for productivity and safety and quality issues.
I guess that would be the responsibility of you, the agency. You really want to know from the client, what are your expectations? What are your objectives? What's wrong? What do you think is wrong? What do you notice that's wrong? You're really not going to find a client who just is out of the clear blue says, I think I want to get somebody inside my plant. They realize that they have such a big problem. They're calling you, and you have solutions that work. I'll give you a recent one. I just did a client who sells electrical components, circuit breakers, whatever products that electricians would use. And it turned out they found out that someone working inside was selling them somewhere local. Well, I wound up being the buyer. All right. So, instead of going on undercover, the idea was I got in touch with local law enforcement myself, and they teamed up with me. They became part of the buy. They were the buyers, and handed me the money, and I gave it to them, but they witnessed it themselves. So the strength of that case doesn't fall apart with a civilian testifying, as there were two detectives with me, and it made it possible to get closure quickly. Now that's a little bit different version of this. That was unique because it wasn't happening in the company; it was happening outside of the company. But again, it's if I needed to, I would have had somebody inside to find out who it was. They knew it was.
Okay. And then, the same thing I think goes with drug investigations. Your undercover operator is going to be looking for that group of people that, sneaks out back and, hits the crack pipe or whatever they're doing. Theft investigations. And you say in your outline, this is one of the major reasons clients hire PI agencies. And I'm going to finish my question, but I'm going to take a little aside because we got a comment from the crowd that I think is pertinent to this. The liability to the company that's hiring you, when they're dealing with, drug use and theft and those kind of things, they've got their company reputation, they've got their company insurance, they've got the duty of care that they should have known some of these things. These are the things that you're looking for, is to help the company, in their they should have known what was going on process. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And so you become a method to fix things, or have enough intelligence to decide, what do we do now? Do we shut down that whole department? Do we hire, or we close down that shift because it's so bad that our quality is completely falling apart? We're getting nothing but return products, and here's where it is. It's in this location, this group. It's conditional on what are they experiencing or what do they suspect. And normally a company that's astute at their own business, they'll know when things are wrong. They're going to know they got shortages. They go to get something out of the back room. There's none left. There should have been 10. So that repeating of unknowns to them is like, we got to get to the bottom of this, and that's our main reason why you're even bringing anybody in. Theft is usually the biggest thing. And as a matter of fact, we had one manufacturer, and we identified the shift, where it was going. We identified who was involved. We identified when it was happening. We knew what truck it was being taken out on. And then we worked with, we did surveillance, knowing that information. And so we were able to engage law enforcement with us and, get a pullover, and here's all the information, all the information and material that was available to us, because we stopped it. Okay. But it didn't happen until we had somebody inside. We needed somebody on every shift until we figured out it's third, it's second shift, it's this group. It's always when this guy shows up, he's a manager, he's redirecting this, he's fixing paperwork. Again, I deal with a lot of that in this course itself, is that these are the reasons that the clients are going to call on you, because they got an issue that they can't resolve, and they don't want to go out of business.
And it seems like one of the things you're doing, if the client has called you and they want to do an undercover operation like that, one of the things you're possibly doing is identifying when and where to do the surveillance that's going to end up being like, that's where the investigator would come out. And once you nail it down to when it's happening, where it's happening, what truck, what person, yes, then you can get evidence that an investigator could then, if necessary, go testify in court and say, I gathered this information,
yes,
verified the documentation. Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Eichler investigation.
And Hal, think about that too. Look at what that says about you as a investigator, that you actually have a strategy that's way beyond typical call PI. They sit outside and they wait. And that's a big deal. Surveillance is very difficult. It's not to undermine it, but to be able to say, this can only be solved by, let's try this. We're going to go for 2 months. And, if it's that big a theft, you're going to want to go that long to make sure you got everybody, you know how big this is.
Yeah, I like that. That's great. So Eichler Investigation Services says, all right, and I'm kind of curious about this too, because I'm not entirely clear on the hiring structure, but they say, who accepts liability if something should go wrong if the investigator is an employee of both companies. And I think you kind of cleared that up the first, but let's go back over it. You identify a person that's going to go undercover. Do you hire that person, or does the company hire that person? And where does the liability lie if something goes wrong?
They're not your hire.
Okay.
You should never use that as a concept. You're never hiring them. You're buying information from them.
Okay.
Okay. You're structuring it like they're a vendor, and they don't get a paycheck. They get a fee for reports. They get fee for this daily report. And so they are an employee. They're always an employee. They remain employee until they leave, and they're handled the same way as employees. They're disciplined the same way if they don't do their job. It's a regular. That's the only way this works. It doesn't work unless they become an employee.
So if they're an employee of the company, is the company paying them like a regular employee, like a W-2 employee?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then you're paying them an additional fee as a vendor separate from
right.
that. Okay, that makes
for the daily report.
Okay.
Right. So you get a 5-day fee for submitting 5 days of reports. You work 5 days, you get 5 days. You miss a 5-day because you're late, car wouldn't start. You're not getting paid 5 days. You're getting paid the 4 days that you were there and you were giving us information.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I love it.
Yeah.
All right, so we've covered the liability issue, I think, and there may be some more questions about that. It is just a little bit after 12 o'clock, which means we're at about the halfway point. I'm Hal Humphreys. This is PI Education's webinar on undercover operations. We're joined today by Bill Mitchell. Bill is a good friend and collaborator with Pursuit Magazine and PI Education. We're happy to have you here, Bill. Continuing on with the idea of covert investigations, one of the folks in the crowd just asked, can't a company just set up a covert camera to observe the problem area within the company? And that's one of the things you and I think we just covered a minute ago, is like a lot of times you don't know where the problem is, and that's where the undercover operative comes in to identify that thing.
Well, and I have done that often. I'll put in cameras where they work. A grain mill had a problem with a whole bunch of material gone out the door, and scales showed that they had more than they were actually supposed to take. So 5 cameras in a warehouse was pretty difficult on third shift to make it happen. But it doesn't always get to the heart of the thing, because now you got to review so much footage to figure out when did that person who just walked through that zone do their thing. So sometimes that may work, and it may be the option. And that may happen also for a PI, because there's not enough employees. There's only several here, and we're trying to figure out, is it the partner, stealing? So when you're in a situation like a restaurant or a bar or anything where there's a lot of people coming and going, like you said, and I agree, is you're not going to know when that is going to take place, and a camera is not going to help you. It's a great idea, and it's a great solution in that environment, but not when you're really challenged like this kind of assignment is.
Okay. Quick question from the crowd. This comes from Andy Adams. And I was wondering when someone was going to ask this question, because the more I'm talking to you about this, the more, like I said in the beginning, this is not a subject about which I know very much. I get excited about things as I learn about them, and I'm thinking, man, this would be a lot of fun to do. Andy Adams asks, how do you break into this type of investigative work? So you say you've been a private investigator for 10 years, you've been doing surveillance, you've been doing some criminal defense work, whatever you do, and you've taken this course on going undercover. Then how do you go market that? How do you get into the business?
Well, it's going to come down to, who do you know? Who knows you? What kind of businesses are in town? You may know someone that actually runs a big company, and planting a seed of, can I talk to you for, a brief moment about an option that you may want to consider? So it may come down to a cold call. You may target those places in your area that have, a vibrant business, and everybody on the outside thinks it's doing well, and you knock on the door and say, hey, here's my card. Oh, by the way, you know what, if you're running any issues, and I do surveillance, but we also can offer you this idea. This is a great concept. Okay. And so that does that. And for that matter, we've handled cases where they suspected theft, and we said, hey, guess what? This is how we're going to go about it. we're going to do it this way first. And that if you do it well, you understand it, you run through the course, you get a lot of this in your head is how this works. It's fairly simple to do it. It's just is following through on the techniques, hiring, putting people in it as an employee, putting them at the right job, making sure you control who gets the information. So it kind of doesn't answer the question that was asked, but the idea is when you see that if you're doing any work for anybody, retail, commercial, those are the clients that you may ask, are you running any issues? Think we can help you with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. So we've got a couple of questions I want to get to, and I'm looking at the outline that we're working off of, and we're not even halfway through the outline yet. But these questions are great, and I think that's what happens anytime
they're great.
We have a topic that's interesting like this. So I'm going to ask these out of order, but Jordan Smith asks, are most undercover investigations done for corporations? And I can say, the work I've done in this area has been more for small businesses who are, experiencing shrinkage, or, the classic, we've got a cash drawer, we've got a credit card machine. If a customer pays with cash, they slip 10 into their pocket and write the sale of business. So in your experience, is it mostly corporations or smaller businesses?
Well, I guess when I preface this to say that a lot of our cases were Fortune 500 only because of where we were located, Metro Philly. So we had New Jersey, Delaware, New York, and Pennsylvania. So we had a lot of big companies that would call on us anyway for whatever. It might have been slip and fall cases. They have their own, workers' comp. So they would say, hey, we trust you. You've done a great job. We're running into some issues. What do you think? How can you help us? So that's how we started this. That's how this concept came about. And I'm actually sharing very privileged information of what we did. And this is how I've actually in the course is the manual we created for our own use, not for anybody else. And, it's time where I figured, you know what? I'd like to pass this on to the industry. I think we did a lot with it. It was very productive. It was very helpful. We solved some major cases. We solved minor cases. It was the way we got to the answers that the clients wanted, and it was different. So it was a new approach to, an old problem of employee dishonesty.
Yeah, so that answers the question of, for Andy Adams, how to best break into this type of investigative work. I would say the first step would be go to PI Education, take Bill Mitchell's course on undercover investigations. Start there. And one of the things that I'm proud of PI Education for is, the people we've worked with over the years, Bill Mitchell, Dean Beers, Kelly Riddle, the courses we put together on our own, we share actual usable information that you can take after the class and apply to your business that day or the next month. And we try to be as transparent as possible about how to do those things. So, if you want to break into this business, cold sales pitch, go to pieducation.com, sign up for Bill Mitchell's class on undercover investigations, and start there. And then use your networking, superpowers as a private investigator, and talk to people that might need this kind of work. Quick question from the crowd: how do you vet? How do you locate and vet potential operatives?
So you size up anybody. That was my favorite thing. My father used to say, always size the person up. If he ever did this, it meant someone was going to get hurt because he was sizing that person up and in a defensive posture. What I mean by sizing up your client, size up the type of employees they already have. Tell us the background of your employees. What makes up a typical shift of employees? What are their educational levels? What are the requirements for the job? What are the skill levels? What would an employee experience working in your company? They have to be detailed, they have to be organized, they have to be prompt, they have to be, just alert to so many. Like, in other words, what is it going to feel like to put somebody in that job? So you yourself would go, okay, I got somebody. I know somebody that's like that. I know someone that's got a likable personality. I know someone who's a risk taker. I know someone who is, like, in other words, not afraid to be put into a place where they might see drug activity, or they're smart, or they're alert, or they're just, they want to be an investigator. That's another thing. I mean, we've had people come on board with us that said, I want to work for you. I say, okay, here's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to put you in on a job and see how you handle it. So, that's one way to do it. And then the other is to just, in your own world, start thinking about, how can I fill that job? Who do I know? I might not be the smartest person, but if I can find somebody that is, I'm going to ask them. Do you know anybody that is looking for a job that's kind of, this kind of personality? And in today's market, a lot of people might be available, but so it's your job to do that research to find somebody that's going to put, a round hole in a round, a peg in a round hole, or a square in a square hole. So you're going to try to find that fit that's going to be a likable fit, that's not going to cause this thing to fall apart in the very beginning. So you really got to do your own homework. But again, over time, we had people want to work for us, and this teacher wanted to work in the summer doing surveillance. We said, well, you know what? We don't have any for that. We don't have any opening that way, but we do have this idea. Let's go ahead and see what you can do. And, people will knock on your door. The other thing you could wind up doing is advertising, that you're interested. We actually used to use little yellow page ads that we put in, a newspaper, and say, if you're interested, and you see what kind of comes out of it. And you may go, well, that was a big waste of time, but this person might work, so you may have to do a lot of interviewing to get that right person.
Yeah.
But know what the job is first.
Okay. So let's move on and talk about, obviously doing an undercover operation is not the right fit all the time. So when is doing an undercover operation not a good idea?
Well, when you do your diligence by asking these questions and you feel like it wouldn't work, like there's no way I can put somebody in here, this is going to be too difficult for me. I don't like the location. I don't like how much travel's involved, or how much involvement I'm going to be on this thing. This is going to be my only job. And so it's not going to work. I just can't manage it and then do my other assignments. And then again, if it's so broken, if their company's that bad, you might go, you know what? I think that this isn't going to solve anything. This is one of those. Have you ever got that kind of client where you said, oh, why did I take that job?
Yeah.
Oh, they have just beat me up. It doesn't matter what I've done. I've tried my best, and you just want them to go away. And and here's one clue on that. If that happens and you get a phone call where someone is just drilling you, triple the price.
Yeah.
I would work for 1,000 for you, but guess what? I'm not going to say that. I can do that for you for 10 grand, and I'd be glad to do it. And
Yeah. And the thing about that kind of business, Bill, is I've found, neither you nor I are spring chickens. We both got a little bit of gray going on here.
Doing it.
And the older you get, the less willing you are to sell yourself to someone that's going to just treat you like a whipping boy. At some point, yes, you can charge more and do that thing. But at some point, if you got a bad client, if you got a client that you're not going to want to work with, fire them, run, don't walk the other direction. Joey Garza asks a good question. Would this class that we're talking about, the undercover class, would it benefit someone like himself in a loss prevention role?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, if you're going to do anything, I had the second largest guard contract in the East Coast, and worked for missile and surface radar in New Jersey. And so we had 10,000 billable hours a week. And so we were constantly in loss prevention mode. And the more you understand what you can do, what your limits are, how you can find a way, a method to observe something or decipher a problem, the smarter you're going to be if you're going to handle anything with loss prevention. You'll learn how to target the right people And where are your vulnerabilities? Where are those things that are happening that you see that you go, gee whiz, that register should not be where it is. That back door should never be open. We have to put signs here. We have to put warnings. We have to have briefings. We have to talk about issues. I had a case that really wasn't undercover, but it was one of the largest theft cases in Philadelphia, where a department store was losing thousands of TVs and you name it, jewelry and whatever. And it turned out we interviewed everybody in that company, and the one who wouldn't show up was the security manager. He wound up being involved with a network with the mob, and they were stealing tractor trailer loads.
Wow.
So
wow.
Interviewing may not work, and that's somewhat relevant to what we're talking about in loss prevention. But yeah, absolutely. If you're going to go that route, you want to know as much as you can of what could be. You may be the one that's hiring a PI if you're the loss prevention manager. And
yeah, I
we've
would
done
think
that too.
if you're loss prevention for a decent sized company, you might even in order to create a layer of protection between yourself and the operative and the C-suite folks that are involved in it. It might be best to hire an investigative agency outside to run that part of it, just to keep it out of everybody's, to put some protection in there. Stephanie Mitchell, our genius manager here at PI Education, just posted a comment, and I think she's absolutely right about this. Women make great undercover operatives.
Bingo. Man, that is that's not to say that I paid Stephanie to say that, but yes, absolutely. There are so many times when we had women working for us that they were able to get information and never be suspect. They were able to fit in. They were approached. They had more people approaching them than they wanted to. So there's that open door that why not? Get someone who could be at the right place at the right time and really not be like most guys. What do you want to talk to that guy for? Maybe he's not a trustworthy person, but boy, I want to go talk to her. She seems like a really nice person. Let me get to know her. And so that way the ball starts rolling quicker. And before you know it, she's ingratiated into the system. Bam. You're on your right way. You're on your way.
All right.
Thanks, Stephanie.
There are a couple of these points in here that I want to get to, because I think they're really important. And I think we've covered the phases of investigation: selecting the right agency, selecting the right investigator. I think we kind of covered that a little bit. Communicating and reporting. I'm almost envisioning dead drops in the middle of the night if it's a really sensitive, crazy important case. But you said something earlier. You don't want any intercompany emails going back and forth, because those could be seen by a secretary or an assistant and could blow the whole thing up. So how do you deal with communicating and reporting what the operative is finding?
So you produce the report. You manage reports. You have to proofread these. You don't just verbatim what your employee is, your vendor, has given you. You want to make sure it's accurate. You go through all the processing, verifying that that's the name of the person, how it's spelled. Is that the right thing that happened? Tell me what you saw and add to it so that you can accurately include important details. And so from there, after you've actually gotten into a system of getting the information and then massaging it, making sure it's accurate and credible and not including too much or not omitting, now you have to say, well, how do I get that? And we often would say to our clients, can you accept a report once a week or twice a week? How would that work? And if we do, can we bring it to your home? If we can we drop it off? And so you do a courier, and you could put it in a sealed envelope to be opened by addressee only, confidential, and get it to them. And so you've eliminated the chance, the one chance that we talk about liability that happens to you. And it is it's a good idea to have like a dead drop or a method. Where can I get this to you? Tell you what, why don't we open up a PO box near your house and get us a key, and we're going to put it in there for you. Or a another way to actually locker or something where they pick it up. You've got to instill in them that the need for information is critical, but so is confidentiality.
Sure. And
It's
and
utmost.
keeping it separate from the business that hired you, I think is crazy important as well, because like I said, I
Yeah.
mean, we live in a world of emails and thumb drives and digital files back
Oh
and forth. You
gosh.
want to eliminate the
Yeah.
digital trail as much as possible for these things, I would think, going
Yeah.
forward. Okay,
Yeah.
so gosh, this time is going so fast.
Mhm.
Maintaining cover stories and tactics to keep your cover. Um, how do you build, a backstory and pocket litter and all that stuff for your operatives?
So, keep it simple. Make some of it legitimate. Don't try to create a new actor role for this person that they can't. They change your first name and no, just stick with the name. But what you wind up doing is making sure that they kind of reduce their footprint on the internet. They don't do a lot of "here I am, can you find me?" Oh, by the way, actually, I work for this company. During the day, and at night I'm at this new place. So you're going to make sure that you have a story that says, "Hey, I just got laid off. I need this job. It's close to home. I was looking for a new challenge." Just something like that, where they're going to fit in. They're going to get hired. They have a skill set. I thought this would work. I need extra money. Whatever the story is, but you're not going to tell a lot when you're on board. You're not going to say, "This is my whole history. This is where I came from. I was raised over here." And then before you know it, they know each other and they know your family. And so you really want that person to be very careful going in that, my story is that I'm out of work.
Yeah.
Why not say it today? I got laid off. I had a great job, but I'm looking to supplement my income. Focus around that kind of thing, that you're not going to tell them all about yourself up front. You keep it real simple.
Right. Okay. Good deal. All right. So we got about 3 minutes left here. That gives us enough time to cover the last point on this list, and then do some wrap up stuff. And I want to thank
Okay.
everybody in the room for being here today. I have thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you, Bill. Always do. Um, but the costs and billings, how do you manage billing and cost on these things? How do you go about kind of bidding the job and dealing with the client for billing purposes?
So you're going to factor in your costs. What's this going to take for me to do this? If they're asking me to put in 2 people on a job, I've got to figure out how am I going to do that. I got to find a person, manage a person, work with them, communicate with them, get their reports. There's a lot involved. So you're probably going to say, "This is a 40-hour week for me. So what am I going to charge for that to actually get paid, uh, pay this person or second person?" So you're factoring in. Usually, the rule of thumb is, if it costs you a third, then bill 3 times that. So in other words, if it costs you $1,000, bill 3,000.
Okay.
So you're actually, 1,000 is going to your overhead, the other, the expenses, the other is going to the business at hand, and then the third is your profit. So you never want to say, "I'll do this for $750 a week," when you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm paying this guy 500 to be there. What am I doing here?" And if the client doesn't understand, then that's the service you walk away from.
Right.
So I mean, we've charged quite a bit, several thousand a week, on the order of, say, $2,500 a week, to do this. And you also want a commitment. You want to be able to say, "I want to do a contract term with you of 2 months minimum. And if it doesn't work, you're still going to pay me the 2 months minimum, because I'm putting out a lot to make this happen, and I'm committing to this project. And it isn't like you're just hiring a painter.
Right.
You're asking us to come in and handle some confidential business at hand. You have to pay for it and be willing to pay for it. But that's the value, is that you're shortcutting the time it takes to get those answers. And they may never get them if you don't go in this direction. So this is unique. It's not like being hired by an insurance claimant or a carrier and doing just, surveillance work. This is more than that. You're trying to get information internally, and it could surface very easily if you have a really good person on board, and all of a sudden they see things and hear things, and great, you're off and running and it's successful. But you want that guarantee for everybody. you're hiring somebody like a vendor that's going in and say, oh, you're going to work here 2 months. Can you do it? Yes, it's perfect for me. I need it. And so you get a minimum, and that becomes part of your negotiating terms.
Okay, very good. Bill, thank you so much. We've gotten a lot of good feedback as we're talking. Several people saying thanks so much for doing this, and I second that. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time to put this together for us. You know, going forward, check out pieducation.com and Bill Mitchell's course on going undercover. Great course at pieducation.com. And Bill, thank you again for being here. I hope you have a great weekend. And I look forward to the next time you and I get to sit and chat.
Absolutely. It's an open door.
All right. Have a good weekend. Thank you.
All right. See you now.
Okay. That has it stopped and ended and ready to go. Man.